get started officially here. This is a great morning for us. We've got our full-time staffer back. Janet! So, Janet, it's really so good to see you. And just a little token of our welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
So good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We'll call the Public Protection Committee to order. Roll call. Put Janet to work immediately.
Bob Fiedler.
Present.
Paul Adams.
Present.
Mark Carlson.
Present.
Kathy Leaf. Present. Tim Ramberg.
Present.
Motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting.
So move.
Supervisor Carlson moves and Adams seconds. Any objection? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Is there any public comment today? Any public comment? Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll move to our business items. The first item is our county administrator on the financial reports. Mr. Witt.
Yeah, we just went over the financial report at county board a couple days ago. So the committees reflect the same information. We're tracking right where we'd expect to be at this time of year, midway through the year. So if there's any questions on the financial report, I'd be happy to answer them, but there's nothing terribly exciting in there.
I did notice, and this was just my lack of understanding, that in that financial report under, I believe it was the Sheriff's Department, there were 3 entries in green ink. And I just didn't understand what the green ink meant. Could you just reflect on that?
Yeah, that's a Judy Ochterhoff request. So red ink means bad stuff, right? Green is good. Green is good. So it was a, so when it's in green ink, that means it's a good thing. So what happens is the revenues, if they go over, they show up actually as a negative, which you'd normally think is bad. And so we had those changed to a different color in that scenario. So it's a revenue that's over expectation.
Well, that's a great explanation. Any questions for the administrator? Although it doesn't relate directly to the financial reports, it relates more to the building. Could I just ask, relative to the law enforcement entities that are there or hope to be there, are we coming along well on their contracting for the space?
Yeah, and I think Chris is here if you'd like a better explanation, but the project is tracking on budget and on time right now, so we don't have any current issues at all identified.
Our next item, I think, will be Phil Golly. We'll speak to the resolution establishing a pretrial subunit.
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Fiedler. So just a bit of background for the last at least several years, but probably going back to the DRC days. In pretrial, the Sheriff's Department has run criminal history checks for us when we need to do assessments or whatever the case may be, which has been great. It's probably not sustainable now that we are a separate department, Justice Support Services. We ask a lot of them every morning when they're probably busy with other calls, and so it's an ongoing thing, and so what we're trying to do here is get the ability to run our own criminal history checks and receive an ORI number through the Department of Justice in Wisconsin and through the FBI. So those are the 2 entities that we have to go through to apply. It's been kind of a back and forth process, but what we found out is we need a resolution establishing pretrial services as pretrial services as a subunit of Justice Support, in order to satisfy certain criteria that we are not just running criminal histories as citizens. So we're asking the PP&J subcommittee to consider this, and then it would move forward to the county board from there, and it would allow us to apply for this with the Department of Justice, several months from now. So I can take any questions if there are questions on that.
Are there questions from the committee? Supervisor
As far as staffing, though, you would still utilize the current staff or other department staff members for it?
Nope, that's a great question. So that this would give our case managers the ability to run criminal history checks. Yep, yeah, great question. And to clarify a little bit, the Department of Justice is fairly picky about this, which is very understandable. So it would just be our pretrial case managers, and we would probably ask access for our treatment court case manager. So there would be 4 or 5 people that would have access to do this. Good question.
I move that we submit to the that a pretrial services subunit of the St. Croix County Justice Support Services Department be established and authorized to perform the administration of criminal justice through pretrial release, pretrial supervision, and rehabilitation of accused persons or criminal offenders.
Do we have a second? Supervisor Leaf moves and Supervisor Carlson seconds. Discussion? Supervisor Adams.
I'm wondering what kind of checks and balances would you have on these individuals and that they're not, in the sheriff's department?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So very strict requirements from the Department of Justice. There's one terminal, so one computer that would be allocated for this. Everyone would have their own unique identifier. So I wouldn't be able to go down and borrow someone else's. So there is a checks and balances. And then I believe, and Brent, you might be able to weigh in on this, there's an audit is there a yearly audit that takes place?
Yes, there is a yearly audit by Wisconsin CIB. So they randomly choose names that have been run for a criminal history check, and they ask the agency to prove a reason why that check was ran.
Thank you.
Who's running the checks now?
It's the dispatch from the sheriff's department. Yeah, and graciously, again, we'll sometimes, depending on the morning, we'll drop for our public safety assessment. We'll drop 10 of them, and they'll turn them around very quickly. So it is a big ask, and I know it doesn't feel like the department minds, but I think as far as sustainability goes, this would be beneficial for everybody.
Seeing no other discussion, we're prepared to vote. So the motion will be, or the vote will be on the resolution establishing a pretrial subunit. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It's adopted. We'll move that forward to the board. Thank you, Phil. Next item is item 3, resolution designating county jailers WRS employment status. I believe our administrator is going to address.
Yeah. Due to a law change in Wisconsin, you guys have an option right now to consider. So let me give you just a little bit of the history of it. In 2011, Wisconsin Act 10 was approved. That took away WRS, or it split WRS benefits. So prior to that, employers paid 100% of WRS contributions. With Act 10 in 2011, that was split where it's a 50-50 contribution for all general employees. Protected class employees were left at 100% contribution, so Sheriff's Department stayed at 100%. So jailers were a little bit different. So there were 12 counties in Wisconsin that classified their jailers as protected rather than as general at that time. Maybe not at that time, but at the end result as of right now. So there was a push to change that for the other 60 counties in Wisconsin. What they wanted to do was provide jailers with the option to basically buy back into that protected class, from a general class to a protected class. So the law change allows those 60 counties, or one of the 12, but one of the 60 counties, to offer, it actually requires them to offer to their jailers the ability to designate themselves as protected class. They will have to pay the difference, though. So the difference between what we're doing, where we're still paying 100% of protected class for our jailers, and what the other 60 counties are doing is who pays for that difference. In this legislation, though, they specifically addressed the other 12 counties, and they said, you have a choice. You can either move to what the other 60 counties are doing, or you can just continue to do what you're doing right now. You can maintain the status quo. So your options are, and I have 2 resolutions in the packet. You'll forward one of them to the county board. One is to affirm the protected status of our jailers, and it just remains status quo. We will continue to pay 100% of their WRS contribution in the protected class. Option 2 is you would designate them as general employees, and we would then cost shift that option to the employees. They would then have to choose whether they wanted to be general or protected, and if they chose to stay protected, they would have to pay out of pocket that difference between the general class and the protected class. It's about 7% of their compensation. So the cost implications are it's $130,000 the county would save to cost shift, but that becomes a burden for the employees. It's a 7% reduction in compensation for them if they wanted to stay protected class. So those are the two options. You can maintain the status quo as protected or designate them as jailers and shift that cost.
Thank you. Supervisor Leaf.
I would move that we confirm the classifications as protected class.
I gotta second that.
Seconded by Supervisor Leaf, seconded by Supervisor Adams to adopt the first resolution suggested by the administrator. Discussion. Supervisor Ramberg.
A question for the Sheriff's Department is, has it been more difficult to get jailers because of the difference in their status as far as filling the positions?
Well, we've always been fortunate here in St. Croix County that we've recognized our jailers as in that protected class. So yes, that for us, that's a recruiting benefit and tool and retention tool. I think it's great that the rest of the state is recognizing what a dangerous job corrections is and categorizing them in the protected class.
Seeing no further discussion on that item, we can go to days and nays. And so affirmative vote would be to support their, maintain the current status and adopt Resolution 1 as stated by the administrator. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution's adopted. Thank you. Our Circuit Court update. Chief Judge Needham.
Thank you. I think these are just more updates, kind of informational. First, for me, the best news is I found a court reporter. I had shared with you at the last meeting my dilemma in having a court reporter who had been with me for 12 years retire and trying to find a new court reporter. I was almost confident I would have to go to a digital audio recording reporter, but God works in mysterious ways, and I had a stenographer apply who joins us from Dakota County, Minnesota. She is jumping the river and coming to St. Croix. She worked in Milwaukee County, started her career. Her husband works for ConocoPhillips. He works over at the Coke refinery. And so she'll be joining me August 14th. So I'll have a stenographic reporter, and you have a very happy judge. Also, Christy doesn't have a report, but I think as of Monday, her office will be fully staffed, which is, again, wonderful news. As you know, for years we struggled, but it also creates, obviously, challenges because she has a number of new staff, and the training involved in bringing one up to speed is incredible. And I would encourage, if you haven't, maybe to go up and visit a clerk's office and just see the level of detail and technical responsibilities that our clerks have. So that's the good news. We're welcoming 2 new corp counsels to court. Both are known entities to the court, Matt Dobby and Anjali Patel. And the transition from the DA to corp counsel doing our CHIPS cases. And so we're pleased about that and having that extra support. If you weren't aware, the budget was approved on July 5th, I believe, and we have some very happy ADAs and assistant public defenders who received, I believe, increase of about $18,000 per year. So starting salary for our assistant district attorney public defenders, I believe, went from about $54,000 up to $72,000 starting. The district attorneys likewise received a comparable bump. So we're hopeful that that will really increase retention. When I started here, we had career assistant district attorneys and public defenders who had been with their respective agencies for decades. I think right now the average experience level in both offices is 10 years or less. And so we're hopeful that with the increased compensation, which was well overdue, that not only attraction but retention will be improved. Nothing really major in the budget as far as the courts are concerned. Out of the significant surplus, the equal branch, the third branch, received nothing in terms of those surplus dollars. The Supreme Court had asked for their own security detail, as right now they do not have a security detail that serves the Supreme Court. And the governor and legislature turned that down and suggested that they could ask help from the State Patrol if they need security. They'd ask for some additional dollars for cybersecurity, which I think have been approved, but not through GPR funding, but through some other funding. No increases in terms of support to the counties. We had requested additional support at the county level for operation of the courts. That likewise was not approved. But I did share with Ken yesterday that the county will be getting a check very soon for circuit court support, as well as reimbursement of certified interpreters that we use in court, as well as a pretty significant portion of our guardian ad litem costs. So $272,000 will be coming to the county in August. And then we'll get another payment in January. So that, at least on the revenue side, is what I can share. The other thing that the budget did, which we think is going to help with some of the dilemmas we've been facing with finding attorneys, is that the public defender private bar rate is now $100. And that mirrors what we pay attorneys when we appoint them. The problem we had prior to this was the public defender would pay $70 per hour. And so we had attorneys who would hold out, not accepting a public defender appointment. We would then, unfortunately, ultimately at times have to appoint a private attorney, and they would get that extra bump. So now with both the court and the public defenders reimbursing at $100 per hour, again, we're hopeful that that will help in terms of our attraction of attorneys willing to take those appointments. And then yesterday, Supervisor Attino brought his therapy dog up to treatment court, and Judge Nordstrand said the dog was welcomed, as well as the participants' appreciation of that. And I don't want to steal Phil's thunder. My understanding, and talking to Judge Nordstrand yesterday, is that there's a plan in the works to start drug testing in New Richmond. Drug testing currently is only done at Justice Support. I have not looked at the demographics of where people who allegedly commit crimes are from, but it's not Hudson. And so we have for many years suggested that testing in New Richmond might be a prudent idea, because folks don't have driver's license. They don't have the ability to oftentimes come in. So as I understand, there is a plan in place through the efforts of Supervisor Fiedler and Dave Osnes and others to start or open an office where we'll be able to test pretrial as well as our drug court participants. And with HHS being there, we have a significant population in New Richmond who uses those services. So that is another bit of good news. That's my report.
Thank you, Chief Judge. Questions, observations? As always, thank you for everything you folks do. Whenever I go around the state and we talk about people, we talk about our relationships with our judges, we're so happy to have the four of you as our circuit judges. And I hear that from our citizens all the time, and thank you again.
And as of August 1st, I celebrated my 29th year on the bench, so.
Whoa. Congratulations. That's Our next item of business will be from our Chief Deputy, and talking about the jail railings update.
Yeah, so thank you. At the committee of the whole, Chair Fiedler had asked that the jail railing project be discussed here at this meeting. So Chris Boss and Taylor Mavis and I have continued to work on that project to reduce the costs. Originally, we were going to use a proprietary screening mesh from a company called Kane, which the cost was going to be extremely high. So we had discovered another project over in Scott County where they had steel fabricators make the mesh panel. So we thought that we could reduce the cost. So over the course of the last few months, construction estimates have continued to come in, and the most recent one was a downward departure, thankfully. So right now the estimate is around $550,000. We had budgeted $700,000 in the KIP initially. The very first construction estimate that we had, I think, was in the lower 600,000 mark. So I certainly understand the concern over the cost, but we continue to work to reduce the cost, and right now that's the estimate. I'm fully confident we can still reduce the costs, hopefully with contingency planning.
Thank you for that update. Just, would you care to just add a little background in case our memories have failed us as to the importance of getting that screen up and the incidents that may have occurred that led to the idea that we had to screen the upper decks?
Certainly. Most recently, we've had within the last year or so, I can't remember exactly when the presentation that the sheriff gave with the video of 2 inmates in particular tying themselves off on the jail railing from the second tier in an attempt to hang themselves. Luckily, the inmates and the correction staff were able to step in time and prevent a death and actually serious injury from either of those 2 people. But that's always been a concern since the jail opened. I think it was building and jails were constructed in a different manner back then. And luckily, we've also never had an incident where an inmate has assaulted a staff member and anybody's gone over the railing during a scuffle. But those are the 2 big concerns that we have. And I think the funds are there that we can make the jail a little bit safer, and I think we should do that.
Supervisor Hamburg.
I was just curious, can you tell yet from the bids that you got in or the information you have in, what the largest portion of that is? Is it materials, staging, because it's a jail, and you're so crowded, or can you tell what the driving force is on the dollars?
Well, I think it's going to be the actual manufacturer of the screens themselves. We're going to try to prefab them if we can and where it makes sense rather than build in place. Once you get down there and see again what the pod area looks like with the octagon shape, it may be logistically a little more difficult to prefab and get them put in place, but we think there's enough clearances that we can do that.
Supervisor Adams.
It's appreciated that we're trying to reduce the cost. And a part of what I was going to ask Supervisor Ramberg already talked about, but are we shortening our quality, our lifespan by trying to keep shrinking the cost?
No, I think the product that we're looking at and we've looked at the manufacturer of that and we're happy with it. We've asked for a couple of additions for caulking in some of the seams so inmates can't hide items within those screening, but we're really happy with the quality of the manufacture of those screens.
Thank you. Supervisor Carlson.
Yeah, I appreciate you trying to keep the costs down. It does seem awfully high, but we have to do it, in my opinion, because we've identified a problem And now if somebody, and we don't do anything about it, if somebody does get hurt, that amount will seem small compared to the lawsuit for us being negligent, so.
Maybe I could also turn to Administrator Witt, and we had a KIP meeting in July. As I recall, we postponed action on this item at that time until we could have this discussion with the Chief Deputy and report back to the full board. Is that where we left it in your judgment?
Yeah, I think that item is still on the KIP list. If you want to modify it at all, the next steps for that process is it'll go to the administration committee in the form of a resolution and then to the county board for final adoption. But if this committee wants to modify that line item before it hits those next two stages, you're more than welcome to. It's currently budgeted at $700,000.
So I know the admin committee meets in mid-August, and again.
Well, not anymore, but
Oh, okay. Just that's.
we'll talk about that
Okay.
later.
So will, timing-wise, would it be, I know we're dealing with estimates because we don't have a final cost as of yet, but would it be helpful for this committee if we had a sense of supporting the Chief Deputy's recommendation at roughly the budget item amount he suggested? We should go ahead and do that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to make the motion, but if somebody would like to make a motion to the effect that we would, I'll say, support what the Chief Deputy has reported in terms of the need for the railing and at the reduced cost that you suggested.
I might suggest that we ask the project manager for the county to interject on it, just to get his idea on what that number, that KIP number should be, because I'm not the construction expert.
Chris, if you'd care to join us with that learned input, we'll accept it.
I think 550 is a plenty good number moving forward. I think we've made a few changes as far as how we look at this, and I think we have enough contingency built into the project to where we're in pretty good shape at 550.
What's the timing? So, because I love that you're saying 550, but I was like, let's give you 6, because I'm thinking if we keep going out in time, things are not going to get any cheaper.
So the drawings are done. So as soon as county board approves in November, my intention is to go out to bid right away. Yeah.
And if I understand the KIP correctly, whatever's left over, Ken takes it back and puts it into the KIP budget anyways, so.
So we'll need some kind of a motion to move this forward to be helpful to the admin committee.
I'll make a motion to change the estimated number from 700,000 to 550 and move forward in the KIP to the administration committee.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Rember, seconded by Supervisor Leaf to move forward with the screening proposal at the dollar amount cited. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and so we'll pass that resolution on to the admin committee. Last item of business is our medical examiner's report. Patty Scheicher.
Good morning, everybody. I just have a few things for you to percolate until the next meeting comes. So first is the potential for fee increases. We're going to be bringing resolution at the next meeting to increase our fees. What you need to percolate is we have two different sets of fees. One is agency fees, so what we charge other counties for scans, stuff like that, readings, storage. Right now, we have that at a set fee, but do you want us to increase that? So that is to agencies. The next fee is cremation, death certificate signing, and disinterments. So cremation and death certificate signing, we send out a lot of fees. And then the thing, it has been the same since 2015. That is when we had a couple of the local funeral homes come in and really talk about the competition. So, and the competition is Minnesota funeral homes that come here. and do stuff, and how that impacts it. So right now, a cremation in Minnesota is $25. It's $150 here. So we have cremation that we do for the ones that die in Minnesota and come here and get cremated in Wisconsin. We don't charge them. That was agreed by the board back when that happened. Other counties are charging people that die outside the county that get cremated here. So, and by law, we have to keep a record of everybody who dies outside the county that gets cremated here. We have 2 crematoriums. So if you die on the weird side of River Falls, there's, you have Division Street. One side is St. Croix County, one side is Pierce County. So if, let's say that person comes to St. Croix County to get cremated, which is what normally would happen, they would pay the Pierce County rate and the St. Croix County rate, which is double. Now, and then add in the increase. So that's one thing to think about. Do you want to charge for out-of-state, out-of-county cremations that happen in St. Croix County? Right now, we don't. The second thing is to increase the current fees for in-county deaths for cremation and death certificates, and that would be 6.5
Yeah,
CPI.
maybe you were going to explain this. In 2015, the state of Wisconsin passed a law that medical examiner fees could not increase except for by the rate of the Consumer Price Index. So we have not increased fees since 2015. Quite frankly, the CPI has been so low up until the last 2 years, it hardly made it worthwhile. CPI last year was 6.5%. So now it actually, the $2 increase actually makes sense rather than 30 cents. So.
So, I mean, it would be a substantial amount of money considering what our caseload is. So, there's different things that play into it, and it's not my decision, it's your decision on what you want for the fees. So, we have about 600, give or take right now, cremations a year, taking out the ones that qualify for Medicare or funeral assistance that we can't charge. And we have never charged for infant and child deaths. That's just kind of been the thing that we do. You're talking a $6 increase would be a substantial amount of money. So that there is going to be up to you guys if you want the increase, but we were working on the resolution now. Right now, we're about 22 cases ahead of last year's rate, so I would anticipate that we're going to be hitting 900 cases this year. Our storage of bodies, the time that we're storing them is increasing. The longest so far this year has been 13 days, and we do charge $25. Oh, there's another fee we got to increase. We do charge $25 for storage out of county. So that's other counties bring their decedents to us to store because they don't have the capacity to store. We are doing us in public health, and we're going to be including quite a few other departments within the county and outside in townships is our child death review. We are going to be reviewing the death of the child that was killed at the cemetery where the gravestone fell on the child. That happened about 2 years ago. It was an out-of-state, out-of-county person, so a lot of people never even knew that this happened. But we have multiple cemeteries in St. Croix County that their tall gravestones are out of repair, and it is a hazard. So we're going to be looking at that. And the way the statutes read, if the township or the cemetery owner decides not to go back to maintaining it, that goes to the municipality. So there's a lot of cemeteries in this county that we need to think about. So that will be a public information type thing. We have been asked by Forensic PACS to partner with them in the university system to do CT scanning for DAs, law enforcement, and other local medical examiner and coroner's offices. That will be next spring. We have forensic radiologists and forensic pathologists coming in from all over the United States that will do this training. Very exciting for that there. We are also looking at purchasing, and really we're going towards grants, the new drug testing. It's called Randox drug testing. So we would be able to bring decedents back to our lab and run a quantitative, qualitative drug test on them and be able to tell law enforcement throughout the county if they tested positive for illegal drugs before we even go any further. The problem being that most of our drug deaths now are older folks who not only have complicated medical history, but we don't see any drugs on the scene. There's nothing there, and family doesn't really admit to drug stuff. So by the time we get the toxicology and everything back, the scenes are they're messed up. So with this Randox, we would be able to get that quantitative, qualitative testing on postmortem blood within 20 minutes of running it. So that really speeds up everything, and we would be able to then give that information to law enforcement, and then they could do what they need to do. So that there's very exciting. I'm working with local legislators and state legislators to see if we can get that equipment here. It's a $55,000 purchase, but it's really kind of the wave of the future, utilizing medical examiners' offices in those cases where, you know, when you find out when the toxicology comes back, 2 weeks if you run straight tox or 6 weeks with a autopsy, it doesn't do anybody any good. So this is really looking at addiction from another perspective. We also have had increase in home burials. So it's approved by the state of Wisconsin. You can do that. So anybody can bury anybody on their own property, as long as you notice it, include the historical society on it. So, you know, you can say Patty's buried in the back 40, you know, next to the big elm, and I have it noted, and that's all. You can do that. We are not sure what the process is to follow through with that. I don't follow through with it. Register of Deeds doesn't follow through with it. The funeral homes don't follow through with it. If you want a private home burial, you know, we don't know how that goes. So that's what you want?
No, but what happens if I buy that property?
Exactly. Then it becomes a law enforcement issue. So especially if it's, you know, 2-3 owners later that you just have a body buried somewhere. So we're looking into that there. As we started looking into that, we also found that we have a lot of our final dispositions are not being carried through, especially in cremations, and we're finding more and more cremains scattered throughout the county in storage lockers. So one of the things that we want to do is with our county cemetery plot is to have a scatter garden so that people can dispose of their cremains in an appropriate way. So that's coming forward too. Next month I have 2 planning ahead classes scheduled, one with the senior group in New Richmond and one with the senior group in Somerset. You know, we're having more and more folks, elderly folks that are passing away that don't have anything set up, and they don't have children. So they don't have any relatives to help with this situation. So it's, you know, helping really get this process going in the long run. We're increasing, we're helping out other counties more and more now with coverage because they don't have enough staff. So it's usually Polk County or Pierce County that we help out with that. We've been fortunate that we have not had to call to have other counties help us out, you know, because we're short-staffed, but we are helping them, and it also really helps us with the conversation of regionalization and why it's important. And also we are reaching out to local legislators to find out about updating the livery service laws. Because the high rate of death, we have more and more people that the funeral homes aren't able to get them back to the service, to the funeral home in time. You know, a person when they die, they start decomposing right away. So if we have the capacity to do livery service, And we would be able to go pick up bodies, bring them to, this is mostly your hospice or nursing home deaths, and then clear that space faster and more economical, really. We have the capacity to do it, but there are some statutes that need some tweaking to be able to do that, and that there would really let us use our equipment, the cooler, our vans, in a more cost-effective way that really would help out not only the families, but keep this moving. I mean, the whole process is what's going on after people die. People really don't have any idea the game of whack-a-mole that it really is. And, you know, we are now up to having 90 different funeral homes that we use. And it is not uncommon for us to have to wait on a hospice death for someone coming from not only out of state, but from the other side of Wisconsin. So that adds an issue with storage and time and decomposing and all that there. So if the livery service words were changed in the statute, we would be able to actually help out in that there. And there you go. That's what I got. Any questions?
I'll open it up to questions from everybody in just a second, but you covered a lot of information across the vast spectrum of your duties. And I was just wondering if perhaps between you and Ken, you could summarize what you are asking us to do now, and then summarize what we might be asking somebody else to do in the near future. For example, our legislators on the last issue you mentioned. But could you and Ken just suggest what you're asking us to do now?
The only thing I'm asking you to do now is to be ready for a resolution next month.
Next month, okay.
And this is why we're doing it. You know,
Yep.
These are all the things, and I think I agree with Ken that we should look at increases, but if you know, it's up to you. Do you want it agency-wide? Do you want it just, so every permit that we sign, we want it to increase? That's up to you. And do you want to start charging for out-of-county cremations? And the fee difference is, again, they die in Minnesota, they pay $25 for a cremation. Then they come here, so right now, we're just approving, which doesn't take a lot of time. But if we're going to charge them that $150, that becomes a case, and we're gonna have to go through all the things that a case goes through. We don't do that now in that, because we're just doing a pass-through. But if we're, and occasionally I'll say, if I get a drug overdose, I'll let law enforcement know, and they open the case. It is not our case. The way Minnesota, or the way our law works, only people that die in St. Croix County are our cases. Do you want us to take on out-of-county deaths? I would recommend no to that one there, and just leave it as it is, and then do the fees to everything else.
Are there further questions for the medical examiner? Supervisor Carlson?
Would the increase of fees then go to your operating budget?
No, it goes to the general fund.
But yes, the fee shows up on her budget. That's where the revenue shows up, within the medical examiners.
So,
On
but
her
her
revenue
operate,
side.
so if we wanted to
Her
increase
revenue is
her
my
operating
revenue.
budget, we would have to do that. Gotcha.
My money's his money.
Okay, thank you, Patty, for that very informative briefing. And we'll look forward to that potential resolution in September then. We're done with our business items. Requests for future agenda items? Seeing none. Announcements and correspondence. Again, I'll just say one announcement. Janet, we're so glad to see you back. And we really appreciated what Amy did, filling in for you. She did a great job, but it's just so glad to have you back. Any other announcements and correspondence that Janet would have? Nope. Anything else? Okay, at this point, we're going to not adjourn the meeting, as I understand it. We're going to adjourn it later. We're going to have our annual jail inspection now. Now, just note that the jail just had a state inspection, and they did nicely, I believe, according to the letter from Mr. Hoover of the Office of Detention. In his report, he did note that our receiving cells and our special needs cells were full. And we know we've heard numerous times over the years about the needs there and how really thankful we are that a couple of years back we enhanced the special needs cells particularly. But so at this point, we will not adjourn, but we're going to recess from here, and we'll take about 5 minutes, and then I believe the Chief Deputy will lead us downstairs.
I will. And I just want to remind everybody what the purpose of this is. I know it's in the packet, but you are to inspect the jail for health, cleanliness, and discipline. I also provided a little bit earlier the jail roster. I added a couple of demographics in there to help you guys understand who we have in custody right now. We also have a meal. It's a regular meal that the inmates are getting served today. So.
With that, we'll recess this meeting, and in 5 minutes, maybe we'll just meet you at the door here, Chief Deputy, and we'll go downstairs. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.